Well, welcome back to the Point of Order podcast, an inside look at California politics in the state legislature. I am your host, Assemblyman Josh Hoover, and very excited to be joined today by a new guest, Joe Parra from the Senate Republican Caucus.
Correct.
Welcome to the show, Joe.
Well, thank you. I'm excited. So it's proof that if you comment enough on your social media sites that you too can get on.
Don't tell people the secret, Joe. You just have to comment enough on Facebook. You also have to have known me for many years, apparently, because we go way back. So it's good. It's good to see you, Joe.
Glad to be here.
So why don't we just get started? A ton to talk about right now. This is probably going to be one of the craziest final months in a while. You know, I mean, I say that every year for the legislature, and so there's a lot to talk about. But we'll ease into it a little bit. So Why don't we just start, tell folks about your background, kind of what your job is in the Senate Republican Caucus, and how you got there.
Absolutely. If you look at my business card, it's a very innocuous job description, policy consultant. But basically, I am a policy consultant with the Senate Republican Caucus, Senate Republican Policy Office. And my particular purview or portfolio is I share the health assignment with another consultant. So we staff the Republican members on the Senate Health Committee. And I also do the vice chair on Senate Human Services. It's 4-1. So I also handle human services issues, which would be CalFresh, CalWorks, foster care, issues of that nature.
That's great.
And I've been doing it. December will be my 20th year with the caucus.
Wow, no way. 20 years.
20 years.
Amazing.
20 years.
What got you into that position? I mean, what was like?
Well, I'm 61. So when I was in college back east at a small college called the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, go Beavers. But I say I'm a frustrated or recovering engineer. Never got there. But when I was back there, some friends dragged me in 1984 to go see Ronald Reagan.
Oh, wow.
And I'm probably that typical story where my parents were both, I'm Latino. My parents were both Democrats, classic Reagan Republicans, very Republican, even though they didn't recognize it. and so saw Ronald Reagan. In fact, long enough ago, where at that rally, Doug Flutie, then the quarterback for Boston College, gave a jersey with a Boston College jersey with Ronald Reagan on it to the president. But saw President Reagan, and I was hooked. And then also one of my fraternity brothers at the time gave me a couple of books. One was The Triumph of Politics, which is David Stockman, who was the OMB director for President Reagan, and he talked about his journey from being a Democrat to becoming director of OMB in the Reagan White House. And then also William Buckley's classic book, God and Man at Yale, The Superstition of Academic Freedom, which talked about that college, right? When you go to college, you think that it's just the unvarnished truth. Well,
right.
that issue is still very, as you know, very relevant today, that universities, just like any institution, have their own ideologies and their own 100%. Ideological bent. And so from that, transferred back to California, Loyola Marymount University, where I took my degree. And however, this is when I was at MIT, befriended a woman from Wellesley, also from California, who had a friend from high school by the name of Dario Fromer. And so one Christmas party met Dario,
That's awesome.
Who was then working for Senator Art Torres. And I said, hey, I think I have the bug, although not your side of the aisle. and he said, well, if you really want to see if this racket is for you, get an internship. And so that following summer, I sent a letter to Esteban Torres, who's a longtime Democrat from the San Gabriel Valley House of Representatives, who was my local congressman. And then also the junior senator from California, Pete Wilson.
Oh, wow.
And I tell people, I go, I wish I could tell you some profound story of my ideological journey, but I like my apartment in Playa del Rey. My roommates were cool. We had a lot of parties. And the Senate office in LA was in West LA.
Oh, yeah. That's a great
And
area.
so otherwise, to work for Torres, I would have had to move home.
Yeah.
And so from that, I'll stop for brevity, but interned that summer in the LA Senate office of Pete Wilson, and the rest, as they say, is history.
Yeah, how cool! What a great story. I mean, obviously Pete Wilson, man, he is. I chatted with him a few months ago, I guess, but man, he is, definitely a historic figure in California politics. And
well, and I'm really, as you know, I mean, the ideological, well, on both parties really, the ideological battle from the more centrist members,
right,
to the far left if you're a Democrat, or the far right if you're Republican, that tension is always there, and I think that tension is a good thing. And I'm an advocate for a big tent, but having been able, because from the internship, again, cutting through some years, then I got to work in the second Wilson administration from 95 to 99. But also worked for guys like former Assemblyman here, now Takasugi, worked on his first campaign, and then worked as a field rep for several years for then Congressman Bob Lagomarsino, who represented Western Ventura County and most of Santa Barbara County. That you saw gentlemen who were conservative, but also pragmatic, not ideologues, and I think that set my compass on a good path. And sometimes, today, personally, again, just to be clear, I'm speaking for myself and not for the caucus. That social media, for instance, if I'm getting a little bit of slings and arrows from the left and the right, then I think I'm exactly where I want to be.
It's a good point, and I think there's unfortunately a lot of sort of perverse incentives now to be sort of more ideological and less pragmatic. And on both sides, I think there's you're rewarded in different ways for being that way, but I do always appreciate when I can go to a colleague on the other side of the aisle and work with them, right? And find some common ground. And I think we've had some really good success doing that. And I really do.
Well, to be able to see that firsthand, because I'm old enough, right, where I remember Big Five, I remember 2/3 budgets, and in my opinion, well, today, I mean, no question, in some quarters, bipartisanship is a dirty word. It's a 4-letter word, and I don't believe that.
Well, tonight we're going to have some bipartisanship. We've got the legislative softball game, so we'll see how we're recording this on a Monday. It's
what is the Vegas line on the over?
Pretty sure that so it used to be Democrats versus Republicans. That was back for most of the history of the game. That was what it was, but they changed it a few years ago to be Northern California versus Southern California.
Nice.
So it's a little more bipartisan, and also part of the problem is that the Democrats had way too many people on their team, so it just didn't work.
Well, I was going to ask what was the over/under on hamstring pulls.
That I thought you were going to say the game. I mean, hamstring pulls.
It's going to be about 9.
Yeah,
I think
it's got to be. I think I might take the over on that one. I did it 2 years ago. I pulled mine, so and I'm one of the younger ones. So.
Well, I know I'm guilty. In my mind, I'm still 29, and then it's like, oh my God, what did I get into?
But Southern California definitely favored. I'm on Northern California team. Really would love to see us get that victory, but we'll see what happens. We don't have quite the same level of talent, but we'll I think we can figure it out. We're scrappy.
I might actually end up going.
Swing
I
by,
didn't
man.
think
Swing
about
by.
it.
We're playing where the A's play.
I completely forgot about it. In fact,
at,
I went
Sutter Health.
my first time on Friday to go see the A's and the Angels. The A's won.
Oh, good.
But
That's good.
it's a very intimate feel to see Major League Baseball.
It's
there.
very intimate, and at the same time, at least a few times I've gone, it's very empty. I mean, there's just not a lot of people there, even despite the fact it's so small. It's kind of interesting. Also, it's sort of overpriced.
Yeah, well, even when the River Cat, and again,
Yeah.
I haven't been to the River Cats in a while, but I love seeing the River Cats. I used to joke minor league baseball, but respect to the concessions, major league prices.
Major league prices. I love it.
But
that's actually very true.
But it's good.
Yeah.
It's baseball, and the weather cooperated. I think today too, it's going to be in the
Today's
80s
going to be real nice.
Yeah.
We got really lucky. So yeah, we've had some great weather this summer. I've just loved it comparatively. Speaking of, and I was also going to mention, you're actually not the first Senate Republican caucus staffer to be on this podcast.
That's what I understand. Was it Mr. Feely?
It was Kirk Feely.
Nice.
And he came in to talk about budget stuff. I think it was last year sometime, when Roger Nilo was unable to join. And so I think, it was funny.
And I do consider Kirk not just a colleague, but a friend. And I've dragged him to a few concerts over the years,
Well, speaking of concerts, I mean, what do you like to do for fun? Getting out of the...
the answer to that
I know
question.
It's always music.
I'm a single guy, no kids, so a lot of my disposable income goes to concerts. And in fact, I was just thinking, people, when you come back, well, even though we're working, it's like the first day back in school, right? Because the legislature's back. And I actually have to put on a collared shirt and slacks and have a tie at the ready. But I was thinking about, what did you do over your summer vacation? So over summer recess. And I think this will demonstrate my wide range of love of music. I can't play a note. I can't sing. You'd have to get several adult beverages in me to do karaoke, but I love attending concerts. So the last 5... So roughly over the recess,
wow, that's awesome.
I saw Wu-Tang Clan.
Oh wow, okay.
I won't throw up the dubs right here, but I saw the Wu.
That's cool.
Very next day, went with Teresa and Eric and another friend to see Dierks Bentley. Then the following week, I went to see guilty pleasure of mine. I love him to death. 82-year-old Barry Manilow.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, Barry was in town.
Barry Manilow. And then at the state fair...
Ludacris?
No, not Luda. Although I've seen Luda.
I was out of town.
It was Southgate's favorite son. I'm blanking. Insane in the Brain. I just had a senior moment, ladies. Cypress Hill. My goodness. Yeah. Sorry, Sendog. Forgot about you, but
it's all good.
Cypress Hill was awesome. And then just about a week ago, drove up to the Center for the Performing Arts in Grass Valley. I don't know if you've ever been there. Yeah. It's like seeing an artist in a high school gymnasium, but I say that That's in the best way. Yeah. Very intimate, but country, outlaw country, Americana.
Country.
Americana artist Steve Earle.
Oh, Steve Earle. Yeah.
Steve Earle, just Steve Earle, and just him. And I want to say just his guitar, but he had his guitar. He had his Italian mandolin. Nice. There's another name for it, and he had his mandolin. So you can see I love hip hop. I love.
That's great.
If I do get invited back, we can do 2 hours on the origins of traditional Jamaican music.
I love it,
because you know how much I love ska, rocksteady, and reggae. But that's for another time.
Love it. I have always loved your musical taste. I would say that we have some alignment there for sure. But that's exciting. I did not go to a single concert when on my recess. But I do have kids, and I was hanging out with them the whole time. Which was fun. We had some fun times. Saw a few movies.
I was going to say, what did you?
Just like went to. I hung out with my youngest. We went and saw Fantastic Four, and the new Jurassic World, and
I did see the Smurfs movie.
And the new Superman,
I had a friend come in from out of town
the Smurfs
with
movie.
their 7-year-old daughter, and I have to admit, don't tell anybody.
Nobody's listening.
I know only 22 people listen to your podcast. Just joking. But I do enjoy children a lot. I guess I'm like a vicarious grandparent, right?
That's cool.
I can
That's cool. Yeah.
get them all, take them to the movies, get them all jacked up on Mountain Dew and cotton candy, and then hand them back to the parent. But
it's fun. I had fun hanging with the kids, and my wife and I did get away for one Giants game, which I don't know if I'm going to do again for a while, because it took us 3.5 hours to drive there, and it was just brutal. The traffic, even in Sacramento, just getting out of Sacramento was brutal. But and then we also ended up seeing Angela Johnson, a comedian, on the way back in Napa, so that was fun. But yeah, other than that, it was pretty chill. So nothing crazy.
Lots of chicken dinners and installations.
Yeah,
and that kind
little
of thing.
bit of that too. A little bit of that too. So you actually sent me this. Before we'll get into our stories of the week next, but you sent me the Kennedy Center selections, which I'm not a big familiar with this, but like the president picks these people.
Well, it's interesting, right? And that's one thing that I'll say, diehard Republican, but not the biggest Trump person, but certainly credit where credit is due. And I say that both on matters of policy where I agree with them, but in something more lighthearted than this. Now, he's gotten, from what I understand, right, reading articles, that he's gotten a little bit of criticism because he installed himself on the Kennedy Center board and is really hands-on with the selections.
Got it.
But again, credit where credit's due on the selections themselves. I thought that they were overall very solid.
Yeah, so we got George Strait.
Country Great.
Country Great. Kiss, which you were excited about that one. Michael Crawford, Gloria Gaynor, and Sylvester Stallone. So yeah, it's good.
Sly Stallone, of course. He's got a great body of work. Not every movie is Casablanca, but yeah. Between the Rocky franchise and the later movies got a little cartoonish, but the original Rocky is just a phenomenal film. And then even with the First Blood, where he played the Vietnam vet, the very first one, very serious. Action-packed, but very serious movie. Michael Crawford, Broadway's not my jam, but of course he's held in high esteem. George Strait, Gloria Gaynor, tremendous singer with kind of two arcs, her disco arc, and then later on, I think she may hold a record for the longest distance or time between Grammy awards.
Interesting.
Her disco life and then her gospel life, and then Kiss.
Gotta love Kiss.
Well, yeah, yes, people get on him for the makeup and what have you, and not the most sophisticated songs, but you have to give it to them for longevity, and you have to give it to them for fun. They're a fun,
definitely fun.
They're a fun band.
I don't know a ton of Kiss music, I'll be honest. I know whatever was on, like Guitar Hero or something.
Rock and Roll All Night.
Rock and Roll All Night. That's probably the only one I could name right now.
Beth?
Honestly, no? I don't think I could name another. I'm not even kidding you. But
Detroit Rock City.
Yeah, Detroit Rock City. Yeah.
I'm not a huge gamer, so I've seen people play Guitar Hero.
I'm not even that into it. I just remember that on there. It's like.
But again, put the putting the politics aside.
Yeah.
And of course, it got a little political because then it came out that Tom Cruise had been asked, and the story goes that through his people that he said no. But
you mean to be in the
to be a Kennedy Center honoree.
Yeah, interesting.
But it's the Kennedys, and I think they've started in the 70s, or so it's been 40, 50 years that they've been doing it.
The 48th class,
it's an honor. So,
that's cool.
If it were up to me, in other words, if I were an entertainer and I would ask, regardless of the president, I think I would say yes.
Sure.
It's a real honor.
Oh yeah, if I was an entertainer or an athlete, and no matter who the president was, I'm probably going to meet him because that'd be
Well, yeah,
cool.
I mean that's a whole nother conversation about going to the White House when you win a Super Bowl or Stanley Cup or World
That'd be
Series.
pretty cool experience.
And of course, and again another subject, but that's the individual in the office versus the office, and those kinds of things. I think are it's about the tradition, it's about the office, and not necessarily who's in there.
Yeah, for sure. So I know we were putting politics aside. Let's bring the politics back for a minute.
Sure.
We'll go through our stories of the week. There's only a few here. I mean, this is the first podcast since recess came back, so we've been on a break for about a month. And so I didn't want to go too far back because a lot of news is old news, but I had to mention I wanted to start on a positive note with some good news, which is the governor signed AB 379,
Yes.
Which would make it a felony to purchase a 16 or 17-year-old minor for sex, something that was a hard-fought bipartisan victory. And really a huge defeat, I think, for sort of the more progressive extremism in the Capitol, right? For those that really didn't want to see that bill pass or move at all. Started as a Maggie Krell bill with the Democratic author, and then ultimately got taken over, I think, by the speaker. But I have to give major props to Maggie Krell for the courage that it took to get that thing across the finish line, even though her name ultimately, wasn't the lead at the end. She is certainly, I would say, deserves a lot of credit for getting that across the finish line. And I got to give some credit to the Republican caucuses as well, because they were also putting a lot of pressure on them.
Well, it's certainly not my issue area, but it was high enough profile. Of course, I have a dozen colleagues in the policy shop that all have their areas of expertise, but we talk all the time, right? And so that was high profile. Followed it closely, and the thing that struck me, the imagery that comes to mind is, when you're a kid and you put your hand on the hot pot and you burn your hand, and your parent tells you, "Don't touch hot things." That lesson is often not learned in politics, because the journeys that Senator Grove's bills on this roughly this subject matter
in previous years
have took, where it dies, the governor weighs in, the public weighs in, and then the bill suddenly gets new life. So with the Krell bill, or what used to be the Krell bill, it was like, oh my God, here we go again. And to me, and again, speaking for myself, that one of the things I've noticed, and I say this with love in my heart, about the majority is that sometimes when you have all the levers of power, both in numbers and in parliamentary procedure, that sometimes it begets laziness.
Oh yeah.
And corner cutting.
Yeah.
And it's like, you got the numbers, just use your numbers. You don't have to do some kind of triple flip procedural maneuver, or in the instance of this bill, where they were too cute by half, and then put out that social media campaign. I think that I sent you a screenshot of.
Yeah, they tried to attack me for.
And it really is right, and probably one of the most overused analogies on both sides. Is this the references to 1984 and George Orwell and this? But that campaign that the majority put out was very Orwellian, accusing Republicans of being soft on crime.
Yeah, incredible.
And child abuse, and so
don't believe what your eyes and ears are hearing. Yeah,
right. Nothing to see here. And I actually watched. I must have had. I know it was some kind of. I had a little bit of a break. And so I watched that initial floor debate on the green carpet on your side.
Oh, yeah.
And the one member that completely lost her mind, almost went on the other side. I won't say her name.
Yeah.
And it's just amazing. And so I have to, just as an aside, my whole time here has been on the red carpet, has been on the Senate side. And although I think I'm a red carpet guy more than a green carpet.
Green carpet's
guy.
a little different. I'll give you that.
It's a little chaotic, yeah.
Hey, I'm just saying though, at least we have buttons, man. I don't know that voice vote thing. I know it's like, I know it's cool, and you guys have only 40, but that's still a lot of waiting.
Well, I remember when before I was here, I used to lobby for a managed care entity. And I still remember that, all those vote who desire to vote, all those vote who desire.
And it's almost like,
like a video game, because if you were against something, you would see 37, 38, 39. Yeah, only 39.
Well, and you gotta love that was back when we killed Bill's brother.
Right.
I don't know if we do. We don't do that very often
simpler
anymore,
time.
but it was a simpler time, a little more, even. But it's funny too because you've got sort of that Pavlov's dog sort of effect with that bell too, where like if you quit paying attention or you kind of like your mind wanders or something, then that bell just like, oh, I gotta push a button now.
But I'm sorry I took us on a tangent, one of my many faults. But going back to this bill, it seemed to me that anybody with and again, I say this with love in my heart, with a modicum of objectivity or memory of the past, you kind of knew where this was going to end up. So I think, again, to use my original analogy, that our friends in the majority unnecessarily burn their hand on the stove again with,
Well, and you said laziness, and I do agree with that sometimes, but I think some of it's also hubris, right? Like, I think it's just the idea that
Sacramento can be an echo chamber.
Like, oh, no, this is our position. No one's going to, if someone pushes back, then it doesn't matter. Like we have the votes, and then they get mad at the, people in the media that actually call them out, and so it's kind of interesting. But
and then before we were rolling, we talked a little bit about bipartisanship and how, and again, I'm not going to point the finger just on one side, but how in some quarters, I think on both sides of the aisle, that in some quarters it can be seen as a dirty word, and in this instance, you saw how, again, in my humble opinion, that Assemblymember Crowell was treated very shabbily in this instance.
No, I think that's why it took so much courage too as a freshman legislator.
Yeah,
right?
kudos to
in
her.
The majority, so it was very.
And we'll see.
Very impressed with
we'll
that.
see how long the memories are in terms of her action on that.
So she's been great. She's actually my neighboring legislator, so we actually work together on some local issues as well. So she's been good to work with. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but also the big news, sort of old news now, Kamala dropped out. Or she didn't drop out. She was never in, but she announced she will not be seeking the governorship. Who did drop out, though, Eleni Kounalakis.
Yeah, that was surprising.
Which actually surprised me a little bit because I thought that, the Kamala news would actually invigorate her campaign. But she decided, I think, to shift to state treasurer. So those brief thoughts on that, if you have any.
Well, and that might, with the lieutenant governor, that might not be a bad move because, and I won't name names, but I've seen at least 3 or 4 or 5 situations on our side of the aisle where you have an up and coming elected, where people start whispering in their ear, run for governor, run for Senate. And because you made that jump from staffer to elected, that being an elected is hard work. And then but also moving from assembly, let's say, to running statewide, that's a huge quantum leap too. And not everybody's immediately ready for that. So if she gets another statewide and gets another 4 or 8 years, and I forget her age, but I think she's still young enough. That seasoning might do her well in the long.
We'll see what happens with Eleni. I mean, there's still a lot of Democrats in the race. I mean, Katie Porter probably the leading candidate right now. You've got Tony Atkins and Tony Thurmond, the 2 Tonys that have very low percentages in the polls.
Well, and then a third Tony, right? Antonio.
And then Antonio Villagrosa.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's interesting because again, not a scientific survey, but I do have a lot of friends on social media on the other side of the aisle, and it's been interesting to see who they're promoting. And in one former elected that I'm friends with is a big Villagrosa guy.
And I've met Villagrosa, and I think he definitely I could see him being someone that can track more to the middle. Not on everything, obviously. He's still going to be left leaning on a lot of things, but does have a pretty good record of being pro business. But I also think it's going to be interesting because it's a wide open race. You've still got two Republicans in it. You've still got some names that could still jump in. Still a lot of time. So we'll see where we go with that. Another note, I always like to get people's thoughts on this because they usually disagree with me on this podcast. But the audit that I had requested on telework for state workers came out this week. And I hate to say it, sometimes an audit comes out and just sort of kind of sounds like all the things I've already been saying about an issue. But basically, the auditor came out last week and said, if you optimize, in the jobs where you can, either a telework or a hybrid schedule where you're allowed to telework 3 days or more per week, can actually save the state $225 million by optimizing office space that's currently being underutilized, and then also reducing your office footprint. Right. Obviously, critics of I've been obviously a proponent of at least maintaining some form of telework in the jobs where it makes sense. I don't think every job should be telework, but I think there are jobs where it can make sense. And the critics of that, I would say, downtown Sacramento will suffer from that, or just that people should just be in the office because you can be more productive. I think that's the argument the governor has made. But curious your thoughts just on the topic in general, because
it's interesting. I was surprised when I saw that. I mean, not surprised like I didn't think there would be savings, but when you see it in print from the auditor, right. It's certainly eye-opening. I like on a lot of things kind of see both sides from a purely selfish perspective. As a staffer, I think if there were any silver linings from the lockdowns, and it doesn't seem like a million years ago, lockdowns, that's again another conversation. But one of the things is that we had no choice, right? That we would come in for our socially distanced hearings, but otherwise you were working from home. And me personally went from somebody that wasn't a fan of working from home. My previous experiences working from home, the laundry suddenly would become more interesting. Vacuuming so I would find a lot of distractions. But now I've really come to appreciate working from home. If I wake up at 5:30 and I wake up bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, I can flip on my computer and start grinding away on analyses in my PJs.
Totally. Yeah.
On the other hand, what annoys me personally is I think this feeling of expectation from some state workers that almost like it's a right. And of the current crew, probably 99% were not hired on a remote work expectation. And so that feeling of expectation, I find a little bothersome. However, and you hit on it already, that for, and I harken back, give you a little trip down memory lane to my time when I was an appointee at the Department of Corporations. You would go into the lobby, and there was 2-inch thick bulletproof plexiglass at the counter. That's a whole nother story. Not very welcoming in terms of a public agency. But my point is, which is I think a point you made, is that some positions in some offices clearly have a public facing if somebody,
Totally.
if you let everybody work from home
couldn't do
and
it.
somebody knocked on your door and nobody was there,
Couldn't do it.
not only is that not a good look for you, but that's not right. And so I do think that for some people, or for some positions, let's say it's not focused on the people, that remote work makes sense, particularly with the savings. But I will say that if I were king for a day, just talking about the caucus staff or ledge staff, I wouldn't mind working from home, but not 5 days a week, because I would miss the esprit de corps. I would miss the physical interaction, the mental interaction, and you can't underestimate when you're having lunch or BSing over coffee, the flow of ideas, and it's like, oh, I never thought, so that to some degree is lost with remote work.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with that. I do think, there's pros and cons to both. I mean, really, there's definitely pros to remote work, and there's some cons as well. But it was funny because the governor tried to, call out hypocrisy, on my calling for this audit, and sort of, I engaged with the legislature. Did end up engaging on this issue a little bit with some bipartisan support. And, the governor tried to say, well, why don't you ask these legislators if their staff works from home? And, I think it sort of proved my point where I've said this whole time, like, no, they don't, because I've said from the very beginning, there are jobs that absolutely have to be in person. Yeah. In fact, the majority of state jobs still remain in person. I think I would say the minority are remote, but there's absolutely jobs. You can't be a Caltrans worker from home, right? You're working on the highways, right? Or you can't be a legislative staffer as effectively from home. And we learned that during COVID, right? When we were trying to work our way through that.
And particularly in your DOs, how could you be a field rep?
You can't go to a ribbon cutting from home. Like, you can't zoom in, right?
Can't get those free chicken dinners by working remotely.
Exactly. So, it's just I actually, have never said that everyone should be remote, and it's funny. That being said, I've talked to state employees who, have explained their jobs to me, and explain what they do, and explain why working from home actually optimizes their environment with their teams, because they all have better setups and better internet and better, just better workflow, being able to work from home. And I think the auditor did point out that there is a recruitment advantage and in some cases a productivity advantage to remote work. So, it's an interesting discussion, one that I love to have, but we can move off of it for now. But I just thought it was interesting that audit came out. We'll link it in the show notes if anyone wants to check it out.
And
further,
I think, right, and again, I'm not a expert on work trends, but I don't think you have to be an expert to see that the trend is toward more remote or hybrid, I think. Yeah,
and there's a couple companies that have sort of backed off of that, and I understand that, but a lot of companies I still talk to are actually selling off some of their buildings. Their employees are mostly remote, and I think, or at least hybrid, and I think there is a happy middle ground there. So, two more quick things, because I want to talk about redistricting, which is the big story, the 800-pound gorilla right now, what we're diving into. This one was kind of funny. Cal Matters did a piece on the 8 quietest lawmakers in the legislature. I don't know if you saw that, but I don't know if you read it, but I was gonna see if you could guess maybe one or two of them.
Well, I peeked and one of them, who's a member of my caucus, doesn't speak a lot because she still has some speech.
Oh, Megan Dowd.
Has some disabilities.
I was going to mention
and I was a little surprised that they didn't mention that.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe
I think they did.
Maybe it was out of respect.
They did in the story,
but
they mentioned sort of her stroke and in the story. But the top 2 actually quietest members are actually both people who are having medical issues. So one, obviously Megan Dowd. The other one, Eloise Gomez-Reyes, who has been out on medical with, I believe, a cancer diagnosis. Okay. So definitely prayers for her as she fights that. But, so definitely two off the top that really I think you got to sort of set aside. But beyond that, I didn't know if you had any guesses.
I did, and like I say, I peaked. But one of the things I would say is, right, one of the most overused phrases on the floor that I think make every ledge staff groan, and you can probably guess, is when a member raises their mic and they get recognized and they say, "Well, I wasn't going to speak on this." But
it happens a lot.
And there are the one, I mean, to kind of cut to one of the main premises of the story that I agree with. And again, I don't think it's rocket science, is that there are members just by their nature that like to talk a lot. But what the story points out is, in terms of effectiveness, that there's no correlation. In fact, maybe an inverse correlation, if anything,
honestly,
between the amount of time that you speak publicly and your bills advancing.
Definitely does not appear. Where
were you in that?
I don't even know where I'm not on either list. So I'm not one of the most talkative. I'm not one of the least talkative. So that's where I like to be, somewhere in the middle.
When you started, were you? In fact, just in terms of shifting, as you as a former staffer, was it a little otherworldly when you started casting votes, or when you started
it was
doing
very
floor
humbling,
speeches? Or
very humbling, a little nerve-wracking at first, but I think I got the hang of it pretty quickly. In terms of, I mean, I don't talk all the time, but I do have things to say on certain issues, and I will express them if the moment calls for it. But yeah, I mean, it was pretty bizarre to be on the other side of the line there.
I know, and I've always wondered that, again, if we were doing a 30-second personality test and you asked Batman or Robin, I identify with Robin. I've always I've been a natural guy behind the guy, so that's why I'm a natural staffer. But I always applaud people like you that make that jump. But what I was going to say is that in the article, one of the people they talked to, non-elected, makes the reference to the boy who cried wolf. That if you're always speaking, and it really is true that somebody doesn't speak a lot on an issue. And again, a lot of times I'll be banging away on analyses, but I have one ear on. I have the TV on, listening to floor session, and somebody who doesn't speak a lot, and then you hear that they're going to say something, that does have impact. So I think there's something to be said for judiciously using your public speaking time.
I was told really early on by a member, another legislator. Well, they actually gave me a compliment. They sort of said, Josh, you don't talk all the time, but when you do talk, I always listen. And I really appreciated that. I thought that was, it was just, it was really nice of them to say that you do kind of want to be someone that people will listen to, right? Even if they don't agree with you. And I think, one of the messages within that is that for the people that do talk all the time, you do kind of tend to tune certain people out, right? And so, and it's easy to do that. And so I kind of, ever since that point, I've been trying to be someone who's like, if I'm going to say something, I want it to be something that actually adds to the discussion. And so that people will actually listen. Right?
Here's one thing that just popped into my head, and as an old boss used to say, off the top of my head, so maybe a little dangerous, but no, one thing but in the advent of social media, and then I forget what prop it was that allowed electeds to use footage from floor for ads and on social media ads and social media posts. I wonder, and one of I'm not a huge It's a Wonderful Night Frank Capra guy, but I love Frank Capra's Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. And so when various groups come in, for their legislative days, could be the widget makers of California. I was telling, well, it's not exactly like Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, but my point is that I've wondered that when members speak now, how is their goal the immediate impact on their fellow members on the floor?
Yeah.
Or are they saying
Good
something
question.
prepared that they're going to use in some kind of ad or social media post?
Yeah.
You know, and it's not, that isn't bad on its face. It just it changes, in my opinion,
Yeah,
it changes
for sure.
the dynamic of the floor debate.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting, and the floor debates always seem like everyone's mostly made up their minds, but I think it's still important for the public to see some sort of debate and discussion.
Well, I think that was another point in that article, or another one you shared, and I don't want to get struck by lightning and say, oh, it's everybody has an open, because realistic, and again, my humble opinion, that at least on the committee level where I work, that probably 9 out of 10 bills, it's a foregone conclusion going into committee. But I also, in the same breath, I agree with you that for the public to be able to hear, and I think even more importantly, not so much on floor, but in committee, for the public to be able to weigh in. Sometimes we bemoan the bill that has 70 minutes of people doing their Me Too's. But I try to look at it, that's democracy in action. People have taken time off work. People have taken time to sometimes travel far distance to come into our committee to say their piece. And to me, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, and you got to respect that for sure. No, I love that. Speaking of saying our piece, and I forget, you said something else that reminded me of this next discussion. But last topic, all right, is the big one, and this is the big one that we're jumping into, redistricting. So there is a current attempt. The governor announced in his, Election Rigging Response Act last week at his press conference, which is, we can get into the Orwellian nature of that as well. That he was going to put forward a proposal this week, which is now E68, just announced this morning.
It's a 3-bill package,
and a 3-bill package, yeah, exactly. And that, I don't have it all in front of me, but that just came out this morning. We're recording on a Monday, to essentially do a mid-decade redistricting of congressional maps. Throw out the maps that were drafted for Congress by the Independent Redistricting Commission, which voters approved, obviously, and have done so the last 2 decades, right, 2010 and 2020, and would put the power back in the hands of the politicians to redraw these maps just for the next, according to the governor, just for the next few years. An incredibly cynical power grab, in my opinion. And I think one of the comments I saw you make about it, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's something, for the governor.
I did post on social media about that.
This is in response to Texas, right, doing a sort of redistricting effort mid-decade as well. But I think you said something along the lines of, 2 wrongs don't make a right.
Well,
right?
yeah, and I still stand by it, and that's one of the pulling the lens back a little bit. That, again, me personally, that's one of the things that I've been with the caucus for 20 years, but before that, I was a Wilson appointee. Worked for a trade association. Like I said, field rep for a member of Congress. So I've been at this racket for over 30 years now, and maybe it's a little Pollyannish, and maybe if I was in I'm not throwing this at you particular, but maybe if I was elected, I would have a little bit of a different take. But I really do think that 2 wrongs don't make a right. Now, with what Texas is doing, again, not an expert, but as I understand it, that you can make the argument that one of or maybe the principal goal, right, is to get more Republican seats. But as I understand it, that there's at least a fig leaf of some, with the current lines being problematic with respect to the Voting Rights Act and what have you.
It is a different
We're
scenario,
clearly here, it's 1,000% in response to what Texas is attempting to do. But what I'm saying is that my lament in all the years I've given my long experience is that and of course, if you don't win, if you don't get the seats, if you don't get the majority, then that obviously hampers your ability to implement your agenda.
Sure.
But that being said, I lament the and whether it's left or right, the win at all cost mentality, because what Texas is doing, again, in my humble opinion, and with what California is proposing, that's not how government should work. And then when you hear just from our friends in the majority here in California that it's just a blatant, well, if they're going to do that, we're going to do that.
Well, let's listen to that. So I'll play you our clip of the week here. And it's Newsom responding to a question about, hey, there's actually a pretty progressive Democrat that came out pretty early opposing this effort by the majority. And Newsom sort of responding to that criticism. So we'll play it to get a flavor of his talking points.
And I want to talk about those other governors in a moment. But first, right here in California, there is a little bit of I guess, opposition to this. There was an assembly member, Alex Lee, who had come out and said that doing this would kick off a cycle of gerrymandering that would kind of lead us down, to a bad place in politics. My response to this, when I look at this, is we're already there. Republicans have gerrymandered Ohio, Florida. They're looking to do it in Texas right now. Utah, North Carolina, it's within an inch of its life. And so what is your response to those folks in the Assembly, in the California Legislature, who I guess are opposing this because they think it's going to set some type of a bad precedent?
Yeah, I think that was a minority view, meaning he's deeply an exception. I've not heard any other utterance from any other member of the Democratic caucus. In fact, quite the contrary. It's been a chorus of support saying, what can we do to help? What are the pathways? What are our considerations? What's the timing on this? And I'm not even sure at the end of the day, the final analysis, he would, in essence, even agree with his own statement. He's a friend, and I don't want to cast aspersions on that. I don't think he fully absorbed the lay of the land as you just laid out. These guys have been rigging, gerrymandering these districts. Look what happened in North Carolina a few years ago. In essence, it was a balanced. It was the difference, by the way, between Speaker Jeffries today versus Speaker Johnson was just what they did in North Carolina. The consequences, what more evidence of the consequences do we need? So I think in the final analysis, there'll be overwhelming support here.
So just a couple comments really quickly, and then I'll get your thoughts.
Sure.
And then we'll start to wrap up. But I think it's really funny that they don't mention the Democratic states that have been incredibly gerrymandered, including the state of Illinois, which might be one of the most gerrymandered states in the country. In fact, even Stephen Colbert was calling out their governor.
They have that one district that's
like the shape of the maps is crazy, right? So certainly it's going on both sides, and I would argue that probably means we need more, and I don't think the Independent Redistricting Commission is perfect, but I think we need more of that. We need more of taking it out of the hands of politicians everywhere, right, on both sides. And I do commend Arnold Schwarzenegger, Governor Schwarzenegger, for fighting for that in California and making that, possible in California. That is, I think, the right policy choice across the country. Would like to see more of that. But, then also, just this idea that, well, Assemblymember Lee just doesn't get it. He doesn't get how important this is. No, he's actually standing on principle, which we probably need more of in today's politics. And so that's my takeaways from it. I'll tell you who isn't enthralled with it is the voters. The Politico poll came out, 2-1 margin, 64% of voters in California want to keep the independent lines, do not want to give this back to politicians. And I actually read the question. It was a pretty fairly asked question.
Was it? Okay.
In fact, I think I have it in here somewhere, but it was, in my mind, it was pretty fair. But yeah.
Well, I think as you were turning off that clip, we heard a little bit of the theme music from The Godfather when I saw that, but which is a Mario Puzo book, Francis Ford Coppola, wonderful film. Again, if you invite me back, we can talk more about the, leave the gun, take the cannolis. But the imagery, and besides being a concert guy, I'm my mother's son, and I love film. the movie that comes to mind and the scene from the movie is from my favorite movie, Casablanca, where Captain Renault is shutting down Rick's because the Nazi commander wants him to, after Victor Laszlo says, play La Marseillaise, and they sing the song and they drown out the Nazi song, is Rick asks Captain Renault, why are you shutting me down? And he says, Rick, I'm shocked. There's gambling going on here. And then the maitre d' comes up and says, your winnings, Captain. And so for our friends in the majority to act like they're so shocked, and again, selective memory, and again, I'm not a huge history guy. I'm more of a live in the present. But how old is the word gerrymander, right? It's early 19th century.
Yeah.
And so for them to act like this is some kind of, and again, I'm not excusing it, but to act like it's some new phenomenon perpetrated only by Republicans is just not true.
It's just not true. And it's been going on with politicians on all sides of the aisle for a long time. And I think that's something that needs to stop. I actually think there's a federal bill that got put forward by Congressman Kiley that would actually stop all of it, which I would, I think actually is getting some bipartisan support, right?
Well,
so it'll be interesting to see what happens with that.
And just to add on a little bit too, that's another, when talking about, I think it was Assemblymember Lee, and like you say, that who often I have profound policy differences with, but on this one, to your point about standing on principle, kudos to him. Yeah. And then two, I do think this, it is kind of again, in my humble opinion, a race to the bottom. And at what point, at what point does it stop?
Well, and it's really interesting too, just how we've seen these groups. So, for example, Common Cause, who is a big proponent of independent redistricting commissions, came out initially and opposed the majority's plan, and then a couple days ago just backtracked and said, you know what, actually we changed our mind, we don't oppose it, we're not going to support it, but we're going to be neutral on it just because it's such a pivotal time in our democracy or whatever.
Well, and you talk about the assembly member standing on principle, that move, and I had not heard about that, but certainly they're not a nominee for the Profile and Courage Award by that action.
Sure, exactly, yeah. So anyway, so it'll be interesting to watch. Ultimately, the map that just came out that is now public would give Democrats, I think, 5 more congressional seats, or at least 5 more competitive congressional seats in California. Would obviously change the makeup of the House, but also really just change the representative of California when you look at some of the communities that are combined together. But that question that got asked by Politico was actually California voters passed initiatives to give an independent citizens redistricting commission the power to draw states' legislative and congressional districts in order to reduce the influence of politicians. Governor Newsom has suggested returning congressional line drawing authority back to the legislature, citing concerns that redistricting efforts in Republican states would give them a partisan advantage. I think that's a pretty fair question, much more fair than the governor's polling that was slanted and still only got 52% support or something like that. So I think they're in trouble here. Ultimately, this has to get decided by the voters. This does have to get approved. Would happen in a November 4th special election. And I just don't see the voters approving it at this time. But there will be major efforts to mislead them through a favorable title and summary and all
a couple of
stuff, so.
just to put a little additional context. A couple of because the commission did the 2010 and 2020 So a couple of things, and one is not the only point is how the technology has changed, right? Because today we've already seen the maps, and I'm sure you've gotten as a member more detailed stuff, and we have the legislation now. I remember back in 1990 when they were doing that reapportionment. I was a field rep for Bob Lago-Mercino, and he would get antsy and say, "What are they doing with the maps?" We would have to call up to the governor's guy on redistricting and wait for his return phone call to get any kind of inkling of what was going on. So it was like a papal conclave back then. And then the 2000 reapportionment, I was lobbying for Molina Healthcare, and I remember, and again, I'm just relaying it. This is not a slam on anybody, But I remember going to a dinner with other members of the third house, with then Speaker of the Assembly Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, relaying showing the different candidates that they had recruited, customized for the district, all A1 candidates. And then we have the 90 reapportionment, not one incumbent lost.
Yeah.
Not one.
Yeah.
Not one.
Pretty wild.
And so the first example was just more about how the technology has changed. The second one is to remind, everybody on this podcast that when and again, I say this with love in my heart, and I say this across the aisle or, across the spectrum, that when the members do it, what's the number one goal is incumbency protection.
Sure, totally. And that's true, and I think that's why California actually should stick with its policy change there and keep the independent redistricting commission. Last thought before we leave, had to go through some of these Babylon Bee headlines only because a lot of them are Gavin focused. So
okay,
I was getting a kick out of it lately. I think my favorite one is Gavin is sort of in line with this redistricting conversation. Gavin Newsom vows to double California's violent crime rate if Trump doesn't stop cleaning up D.C., which I think had to be one of the favorite ones I've seen in a long time. But just kind of pointing out the ridiculousness of this race to the bottom, right? As you kind of were talking about. I think that's probably it for the Gavin ones. I feel like there's a couple others, but I'm not seeing them at the moment. One of them was also crime related, which Metropolis sues Superman for reducing crime, which is a funny one too. But I think you're absolutely right about the race to the bottom, and I hope that we can stop this in the legislature. If it doesn't get stopped in the legislature in this next week, it will either need to be stopped in court or it'll need to be stopped by the voters. And I think the voters will ultimately. The good news is they will have the final say, which
on Saturday afternoon, like I texted you and I was enjoying the pleasant afternoon, smoking a stogie and having a beer on my porch and just enjoying a beautiful Midtown afternoon. But one of the other people I was communicating with is a former staffer who did a lot of work on reapportionment over the years. And his comment was he thinks if it gets on the ballot, it passes.
Interesting.
But that there's that the real chance is with the California Supreme Court. That sometimes you think, well, they're left leaning, but according to him, they're very enamored and very supportive of the commission. Yeah. So we'll see.
I think we'll see. That's going to be really fascinating. I think there's still a couple big avenues to stop this. So we'll see how that goes. Joe, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. We got to wrap.
This was fun. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm glad. I'm glad you're able to make it. Our next guest will be Joe Patterson's returning in a couple weeks on September 2nd.
I like it. You got to keep the Joe theme going.
Yeah, we're keeping the Joe theme going for end of session here. If you have ideas for future shows, you can email pointoforderpod@gmail.com. As always, listen on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Follow on socials @pointoforderpod. And you can follow myself on X @Joshua_Hoover. Joe, thanks so much. Appreciate your time. And hopefully we'll have you on again.
Again, like I say, I want to be the Joan Rivers of this podcast.
The Joan Rivers, man. You're just going to step in and perform.
Right on.
I love it. All right. Have a good one. See you soon.
Take care.